We want to talk about the debate. We want to obviously talk about Donald Trump, and we want to talk hopefully about a few things other than just Donald Trump. Let me start, Michael, with this question for you. Donald Trump is now the clear leader in the national polls and in many of the state polls. Mm-hmm. Does that make him the candidate to beat? And if not, who is?
Oh, I think it makes him the candidate to catch up to. You know, the idea being that he's creating some separation, you know, in the numbers. But the question is, how do you begin to get into the space that he is clearly occupying with the American people, and certainly with the base of the party? A lot of folks have wasted, I think, a lot of energy trying to figure out when Donald Trump's balloon is going to pop, when he's going to get out of the race. This is just a national nightmare that will end soon, and all of that crazy talk. Instead of trying to understand what is it he is saying that is resonating with voters. What is it he is doing? How is he doing it that is allowing folks to gravitate towards him? And I think that's going to be the challenge beginning right now for a lot of the other candidates, to see how they, A, understand what's going on, and then B, fill that space with their message, their vision, their thoughts about the future of the country, and to put the pressure on Trump to then go to the next level on substance, on policy, et cetera.
Kellyanne, Senator Rand Paul said recently that this has been a moment of temporary insanity within the Republican Party. How would you describe it? And again, to the same question I asked Chairman Steele, is Trump the person to beat? And if not, who is?
Donald Trump, first of all, thank you very much for having me to Jones Day, to the Washington Post, and to all of you. Dan, I think Trump is the person to study more than the person to beat. And there's been so much hand-wringing over how did he get here, when will he leave, what will hopefully make him deflate. As a political professional, you want to study why his voters are his voters. And who are their second and third choices? That's something at my firm we've been doing with great earnestness recently. Where will the others go if, in fact, he decides to leave the race, or if, as voters often do, they decide to poke the other fruit and flirt around a little bit. Remember, in 2012, 7 different Republicans held the top spot at some time or another. And we're always told that's because it was a much weaker field. No, it's also because of voters. Voters know, especially this time, they have many choices, they have loads of time, and there's no rush to coalesce around 1 or 2 people who the wizards in Washington tell them are the front runners, quote, who can win. I haven't even heard the word electability in the month since Donald Trump started to rise in the polls. The thing about Trump that fascinates me is 2 things. One is how he got where he is to begin with. He checks many voter boxes. If you just listen to what voters want in a candidate, they will tell you, I want someone who's been successful outside of politics, somebody who owes nobody anything in Washington or elsewhere, someone who speaks their mind, who clicks with, says things I don't want to say but that I feel. But what fascinates me about him on the other side of the ledger is the reasons that candidates are usually pushed out of a race don't seem to apply to him. You can't raise enough money. You can't get traction in the polls. You can't get traction on an issue. You can't get any earned media. None of this applies to him. That's how people usually exit the race sooner or later. And so I believe he'll stay in it as long as he wants to stay in it. It's probably up to him. These polls change over time. People start to study things substantively. Voters love people who have never held a job outside of politics, but they keep on electing people with experience in politics because somehow that matters to him. The final thing I'll say about Donald Trump is I believe part of why he ended up running this time as opposed to all the times he flirted with it and did not is because people called him a circus act, a clown, a joke. For what purpose? First of all, it's not that nice. But secondly, you know, who are some of these 22-year-old bloggers that work for unprofitable outlets, you know, insulting a guy who employs 22,000 people and has made something of his life? So if you want to treat someone a certain way, maybe you better ignore them next time because you, as my grandmother used to say, be careful what you wish for.
Aaron, as you've watched this Trump phenomenon over the last 60 days, what has it told you about the Republican Party?
It's fascinating. It truly is. I mean, I think that one of the amazing things is it's not like Donald Trump has a bunch of policy positions that are way off the rest of the Republican field, whether it be climate change or immigration or women's health or anything else. Donald Trump is basically aligned with the majority of the Republican field right now. I think he has a fairly amazing way of presenting himself. I think he has the ability to basically get wall-to-wall TV coverage, and just watching how he goes about it, it's like, here's my cell phone, call it, which he's basically giving a free robocall to himself because all of these people are calling his cell phone because it's splattered all over the internet and they think it's cool. He calls up reporters and berates them. He attacks the Republicans by name. He attacks Republican icons by name, but continues to just plow ahead. And I think the fact that he has a 2-to-1 advantage in the national polls over the next, which is kind of amazing to me. It's not like Donald Trump is just kind of there. He's dominating, and I think that it shows that there's a lot of uncertainty in what the Republicans want nationally. I mean, the whole national poll thing, and it's not the way the process works, but it's really going to be interesting to see how he goes forward. And I've talked to friends of mine in Iowa, and Donald Trump is making good headway in Iowa as well. It's not like he's just this national phenomenon. He's actually organizing in places that matter for the nominating process.
Do you take him seriously as a threat to be the nominee of the party?
Yes, definitely.
You do?
Yeah, the guy has basically unlimited money. He's got 100% name ID. He's got a 2-to-1 polling advantage, and he's the guy who's running his Iowa caucus program, ran Rick Santorum's I think he was Rick Santorum's caucus director.
Right.
Santorum won Iowa, so it's not like he's just got this hodgepodge team out there. I think that he's very credible, but it's, at the end of the day, he's not, from a policy perspective, he's not way out of line with what the other folks are saying, so how do they catch up to him?
Answer this question if you can. In what ways over the last month or 6 weeks has your assessment of Donald Trump as a politician changed?
How's it changed? I think probably, I think the level of seriousness, despite what you may see on television from time to time, having known him and worked with him in my capacity as chairman of the National Party, but also as a state chairman in Maryland and county chairman as lieutenant governor. So in various political roles, the seriousness with which he's approaching this, outside of the glare of the cameras, I think is really a substantive change in his approach. And it really goes back to what you were saying about how he's coming into this and is not a fly-by-night venture from. He's serious about this. And what he's doing is he's bringing an unconventional approach to a very conventional process. He's bringing an out-of-the-box mindset, a business mindset, because business, for all of its conservative nature, really does kind of push the edges and goes outside the box. That's what technology does. That's what, a lot of things we see happening in the economy oftentimes is from people pushing the envelope to go to the next level. That's what he's doing politically, and we've never seen it before, not seen it done this way. And of course, for the folks in Washington, it's a freak show. But for the country, it's like refreshing.
Yes.
Because it's honest, it's authentic. I've been in rooms with Democrats, I've been in rooms with independents and Republicans, and I hear the same word over and over again with him. He's authentic, he's real. When you have someone, a caucus goer in Iowa or someone in New Hampshire, a blue-collar worker say, yeah, that billionaire is just like me. Hello. There's your race. And that goes back to what I was saying before. If I'm a Republican candidate for the presidency standing on the stage with a billionaire whom everyone is viewing just like them, I need to figure out what that magic juice is and drink some of it.
So we're going to mostly talk about Republicans here tonight, but you raised an interesting point. As we've watched the Trump phenomenon, there's something else that's been happening on the Democratic side, which is the rise of Bernie Sanders, but also a deterioration in the image of Hillary Clinton, who's perceived as the dominant, almost, likely frontrunner for the nomination. Aaron, how serious are those concerns as you watch the other side of this, and what could Hillary Clinton learn from Donald Trump about authenticity?
I think that, voters want to, and I think that this is where Hillary is already. Voters want to hear answers to the questions that they're concerned about. Like, it truly, like, you need to talk about the issues that they care about. And that's what Hillary's talking about right now. While I feel like on the Democratic side, they're talking a lot about income inequality and college affordability and issues like that. On the Republican side right now, it's basically focused on Donald Trump and what crazy thing Donald Trump has said. Are we going to build a 50-foot wall along the Mexican border or a 25-foot wall along the Mexican border? I mean, those are the sort of issues that I think Trump is being pushed into the forefront, and it's allowing Hillary to show that, like, she has serious answers for serious questions. I think on the...
But why is the trust issue going downhill for her at the same time?
I mean, I think that the more
I know you don't speak for the campaign.
The more that she's out there and the more people see her, the more they're going to remember what they love about her. I mean, I think that, in Iowa, she won the primary in Iowa by 10 points. She's beloved here. I think she's going to do extraordinarily well. I think part of it is it's such an early point in the process, and she has the bright shining light almost solely on her, and it's easy to sort of poke holes in her candidacy at 16 months before. She's in a primary, but it's not nearly as dynamic as the Republican primary.
Do you mean she won Ohio? Because she lost Iowa, but she came in third in Iowa.
She won Ohio, yeah.
Oh, Ohio, yeah.
She
came in third.
Yeah,
she lost to Barack Obama and John Edwards.
Kellyanne, answer that same question. What could she learn from
No, I thought Aaron did a really good college try in trying to resuscitate Hillary Clinton. But, folks, I mean, there's tripartisan concern about Hillary Clinton in many of these polls, and there's a reason for that. She also has, look at her versus Donald Trump. He's got 100% name ID, as Michael Steele points out. And it's benefiting him. She has 100% name ID and seems to have nowhere else to go to define herself. And I just want her to survive long enough to be the nominee, Dan. I get worried that it might actually be somebody who's a little bit more accessible, joyful on the trail.
But that's a different view than Republicans had 6 months ago.
Oh, absolutely. But she seems to be a different candidate. She hasn't worn well, and I mean that as a complete sterile cold analysis. Why? You have the trust deficit. So political professionals in here, candidates can learn how to become better debaters. They can learn how to answer questions more crisply, get your roadmap out. They can start connecting with grassroots better. I don't know. I simply don't know how you make up a trust deficit. I don't know where you go to get that integrity, that sense of honesty back from the voters. And it's in everybody's polling, as you point out. Not Republican polling, everybody's polling. The other thing about Hillary Clinton that fascinates me is what normally attracts people, male and female voters, to female candidates doesn't seem to apply to her. So normally people say, oh, a female candidate. I've never heard of her before. She's running for Congress, mayor, senator, whether it's Patty Murray years ago as the PTA mom, or it's Joni Ernst last year. She's fresh, she's new. That doesn't apply to Hillary Clinton. Secondly, people will say, I think women on balance are just less corruptible. They're more ethical. Doesn't really apply here. Third, you see that in the honesty and integrity measures. Third, people will say women candidates tend to be a little bit more nurturing, a little bit more warm and accessible. So that she's not seen that way, as you know, in the polling. I don't discount her or dismiss her or underestimate her at all. I think she will have a ton of money, a great deal of support, all the king's horses, all the king's men of the Democratic Party. But the Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump factors show that nobody's voters are safe, and you can't take any of them for granted. Yeah. And I also just think that voters want to see more than people say, oh, the Republicans have too many candidates, it's so silly. Whoever the nominee is going to be very tested and very poked. The person's going to be extremely vetted. And I think that benefits. I like our odds this time because this is the first time the Republican Party, if Mrs. Clinton is the nominee, Secretary Clinton is the nominee, we all of a sudden can play role reversal. The Democrats have done a masterful job for 60 years of elevating and electing transformational, generational type of figures who were all told, by the way, you can't win, don't even bother. JFK ran and won. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, even Jimmy Carter was a relatively young man when he came into the White House with a 9-year-old daughter. So their candidates never listen to this nonsense of, you can't win, don't even bother. And they elevate and indeed elect these generational, transformational candidates. We don't, and we may be able to this time.
You talk about the poking that will begin soon. It could begin tomorrow night. Michael, if you are any of the other candidates, what's your strategy tomorrow night? What should be those?
Oh, this is easy. That's easy. Stay in your lane. Yeah. Let Donald Trump go wherever Donald Trump's going to go. Stay in your lane, because you can't compete with that. You cannot compete with the unknown.
You not engage?
No, I wouldn't say don't engage. Engage.
I mean, it's easier said than done to say stay in.
Right. Well, no. Actually, it's easier than you think because it's all about discipline. If you are John Kasich, it is not in your benefit to come out on that stage and directly take on Donald Trump, because you have your own message, your state, your leadership, what you've done in Congress. So you've got a story and a narrative that you can share that translates into policy, that translates politically. You don't need to go and prove that you're mano a mano with Donald Trump.
But many of these candidates have already gone after Donald Trump.
They have the bruises on their butt to show for it.
But, I mean, would they not stand up for that tomorrow night?
Well, again, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying don't engage. What I'm saying is there's no need for you to go and poke him first. I mean, Donald Trump has even said himself, I'm not going in looking for a fight. So if you take me on, I'm going to give as good as I get, probably better. So the idea is stay in your lane, lay out your message and your vision. If in the course of that conversation, Donald Trump makes an offhanded remark or a direct remark about you or something you said, respond to that, but respond to it contextually. Do not get off the ramp and go off into the wilderness somewhere, because that's a rabbit hole you don't want to go down.
From a Democrat's perspective, what are you going to be looking for most tomorrow night?
I mean, I think that from the Trump perspective, is anyone going to be willing to call out when he says something crazy? Like if he attacks someone, like, is anyone going to be willing to stand up to him, basically? Because it does seem like the majority of the Republican field is terrified of Donald Trump. They're terrified of his voters. They're terrified, is he going to run as an independent? Can we take him on? What's going to happen?
Call him a loser.
Right. Yeah, is he going to attack them? Is he going to give out their cell phone number on TV? And they're going to get a bunch of prank calls. But is anyone going to be willing to stand up for that and highlight why he's wrong? Which I think
maybe someone will call his cell phone number from the stage.
Right. That would be a fantastic tactic, I think. But I think that'll be, I think I'll be really interested to see how Governor Kasich does. I mean, it's, Governor Kasich's on his home turf. The fact that he was able to make the debate, I think, was a win for him. I think that he probably already won the debate just by being included. I think it could have been, embarrassing to have a debate in Cleveland and not be able to be on the stage. It was a smart use of a couple $1 million in New Hampshire to help get him there. But I think that it'll be really interesting to see how he does and to see how the field takes on Trump.
Kellyanne, what would be more problematic for everyone on that stage tomorrow night? Not just short term in terms of who's declared the winner or loser of the debate, but over a longer period of time. A slashing, strident Donald Trump or a civil, contained, polite Donald Trump?
The latter would be worse for them, because that puts the burden on people to go and grab their own headlines and make their own luck, much as he has in the last month, and make sure that in the coverage of the immediate coverage, perhaps on Twitter, other social media, Live Blog, Washington Post Live, and then, of course, all the coverage the next day and into the weekend, it's easy to ignore half of the field, even non-purposely, because there are 10 people. So if you feel like you want to show the two that absolutely bombed, didn't have much to say, looked a little unconfident answering a certain policy question or two, and then you want to show the people who surprised and who probably improved their position, you're basically ignoring the other 5. So I think the goal for them is you made it into the top 10, but make sure you make it into the next round of the top 5 or 4 who are talked about and have shelf life after those next couple days. I think you do that, Dan, irrespective of which Donald Trump shows up tomorrow.
Yeah, that's why you stay in your lane.
The Trump surge has, for the time being, kind of suppressed what everyone thought would be the dynamic of this nomination process, which is the establishment versus kind of the populist and conservative insurgency. What's the state of that at this point?
It is in some degree, I guess, chaos, which I think is wonderful. I think the party needs to have this sort of earth-shattering moment where it comes to grips with its identity and its messengers and who has the message and who can be that messenger. And a lot of the angst that's been built up over the years is now beginning to play itself out. You see the same on the Democrat side. The Dems are, they're kind of like, oh, no, everything's fine. We're doing well. Whistling past this graveyard, and not a big problem. But there is a problem. You've got in New Hampshire now, Bernie Sanders is within 6 points of Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire. And that trend line bodes well for Bernie. And you see it played out on the Republican side. So what does it say, not about the politicians and the political party so much, it says a lot, but it says more about where the people are. It says more about what's pushing and motivating you to get to the point where you're so ticked off that you're willing, you know what, screw it. We're just going to go and do this thing wild. We're just going to go in a whole different direction. I think that's healthy and refreshing for politics right now. The country is finally waking up and saying, we're mad as hell, we're not taking it anymore, and damn it, you better listen. And they're getting everyone's attention in Washington and around the country, Democrat and Republican alike, and I think that's good.
Aaron, you know this state and this region as well as anybody in the country. Democrats have won Ohio, 4 of the last 6 elections? So they've won Pennsylvania 6 of 6, Michigan 6 of 6, Illinois 6 of 6, Wisconsin 6 of 6. As you look at this field of Republican candidates, who's the one who could put those states into play that they haven't been able to win?
And initially, I thought that Scott Walker has a certain Midwestern appeal. A lot of those are Midwestern battleground states. I think one of the fatal flaws for Scott Walker is going to be the attacks he had on labor unions in Wisconsin. I think that he will energize the labor base in a way that has never been done before, which I think will be fantastic. I think that Governor Kasich could be a formidable candidate in those states as well. I think that the battleground states that are out there, the majority of them are in the Midwest, and I think that Midwesterners, they can relate to other Midwesterners, and they can see that, I think that this person understands where I come from. I relate to the issues that they care about. They talk the same language I do. Therefore, I trust that person with my vote.
How would you see Jeb Bush in that?
It's challenging. I mean, I think that because he's kind of all over the place. His gubernatorial record is one thing. He's trying to dismiss some of the more moderate things he did as governor. He doesn't want to lose the conservative base. Is there fatigue? Is there Bush fatigue that's out there? The same thing you're talking. How's all that going to shake out? And he can't break through this field. His inability to garner any attention or any support right now is kind of fascinating to me. I mean, the fact that the friend I talked to in Iowa on my way up here, he thinks that Jeb Bush would get 4th place in Iowa right now. Dan Pfeiffer wrote a thing today saying that Jeb Bush should not run in Iowa. So getting 4th place in Iowa could be pretty close to fatal going into New Hampshire, where Kasich and Christie and others are running really hard in New Hampshire. So to get 4th and 3rd and 2nd and South, I mean, it seems really challenging for him.
We're basically out of time, and we need to move on to the next panel. But Kellyanne, I want to get a quick response from you, if I can, to this question. If the Trump thing disappeared tomorrow and we're sort of back to status quo ante, what's the biggest obstacle at this point to the Republican Party to win the general election?
The electoral map, the electoral college. And I will say that this year, Dan, because we have, Michael Steele referred to it as chaos and good for the party, which is so true, we finally have my dream election, which is that the pro-competition, pro-free market party finally has a free market competitive principle primary where people aren't already saying, she can win, he can't win. And I would always say, how do you know he can win? He's high in the polls. I'm like, yeah, I guess so. How did he get there? Everybody thinks he can win. Keep saying it. Gets high in the polls. Plus, he raised some money. How did he raise all that money? He's high in the polls. Everybody thinks he can win. They wrote a check. And it's been this fiction of electability has been a vice around the neck of the Republican Party, in my view, because they say he can win, and then, of course, they haven't in recent years. The only way you can prove if you can or cannot win, by the way, is if you do or you don't. So it's not electability that should be the focus. It's the Electoral College. And that's the part that scares me most. I'm a Republican consultant who very much believes in the so-called blue wall, the Democratic blue wall, that the Democrats start with a certain number of Electoral College advantages. And you can't just try to go steal the other people's customers. I think you have to do what Senator Obama did in his 2008 run for president, which is find new customers. There are loads of conservatives who did not vote last time. They did not feel inspired to. Some that didn't vote in 2008. Some that aren't even registered. You have to find new customers, people who perhaps are disaffected from the system and wouldn't go for the either standard bearers, familiar names from the 90s, let's just say, in either party, and are looking for something new and fresh. But it would be the Electoral College, and I think, don't say the word electability, Republicans. Focus on Electoral College now.
On that note, we will close it off. Kellyanne, Aaron,
thank you.
Chairman Steele, thank you very much. Thank you all. I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague Kathleen Parker for the next panel.
All right.